All right, welcome back. Obviously, we're going to be going over users and groups for this one. So this is going to be a relatively quick one as well. We've already done it a little bit with one of the examples we had from a few lectures ago. We're going to go over it in an official manner here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it in the VM or at all in this case, just because we're going to be using it over and over and over and over again in class, and then with our big, well, what we would call a project or a full solution. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into this presentation. And what I really want you to focus on for this one is to understand the concepts, like always, but we'll get into that right here because it's basically the first thing that we go over. So if you can remember everything that's on this page, you'll be fine. Okay, everything else is just examples and references, so if you need it for later, this PowerPoint will be helpful. Okay, so let's go over this, and this is the thing that you need to remember. All users must have a group. That is not a choice. It has to have a group. If you don't want the user to be a part of a group, the Linux will make a group for that user as the user itself. Okay, and hopefully that made sense. And I'll show you an example of what I mean here in a second. All users have to have one primary group. Okay, that also means that they can be a part of secondary groups. Okay, so all users have to have an ID. All groups have to have an ID. Files created by the user belongs to the user and the primary group. So this means if you have a user that's a part of the accounting group and they create a file, everyone in that accounting group will have access to that file. And by access, I mean full access. It's owned by the group. Okay? Groups cannot contain other groups, so there's no group nesting like you would have in Active Directory. And then a user can have a primary group and a supplementary group, which I've already stated. But again, it cannot be nested. If you can remember all those things, you'll be fine. Okay? Everything else is just examples of how to do what we're trying to get to. Okay, so as I showed before in a couple presentations ago, if you use the cat command, etc passwd, this will show you all your user accounts. Okay, so we got root here. All right, so daemons, bin, these are all your system accounts, your system entities. I do not see a user in here, probably because we haven't had one yet on this example. Oh, no, I lied, right here. So Briggs JA, X, 1,000, I'll get into what all these mean in a second. Ubuntu workstation, and then home directory, bin bash. All right. So the format, different person, but Briggs 53, okay. Username, case sensitive. Admin user is root, okay. Root should be the first line in the etc password file, which it was in this example right here, okay? Moving on, encoding type. This is for the password. Typically, passwords are encoded and stored in the shadow file, okay? We're not going to get over or into that too much with this course. If we ever pick up another Linux admin course in the Alfred State curriculum, then that's when we would get into the shadow file, okay? User ID. All right, UID is common for shorthand. System accounts are 0 through 999. As I showed you before in this example, there are a bunch of system accounts, okay? So users start at 1,000. Here we go. Moving on, user ID, primary group ID. This is where comments would be held if there were comments. All right, this is for comments right here and here. I didn't have a comment for this one, but if there was one, it'd be located here. All right. Home directory, unless you change the defaults in user add, all your users are going to be in your home directory. So / home and then whatever that username is. And then default shell. So you can change this as well, but most of the time it's going to be bash. Okay, creating users with home directory. So we went over this a little bit in an example a few lectures ago, However, it's worth a review. So sudo user add -m username. Okay, that's going to give you a home directory. And then sudo pass wd or password d, as I know it, test user. So this is you're going to hand in this username, which tells password d which user you're trying to set the password for, and then you can set the password here and then retype it here. So easy enough. And then just like in the example before, -e is going to set that password to expire. So when this test user logs in, it's going to force them to have a new password. Set a new password. Okay. So SU is switch user. We haven't used that yet. I'm also doing this through the terminal. So we did the example last time through the GUI where we click on the username and log in. This is doing it through the command line. So switch user, test user, password. So the original password that we set, you're required to change your password immediately. So, and then we set the new password. Okay. Nothing too difficult there. Delete user and home directory. Okay, we haven't had a reason to delete a user yet, but this is how you do it. Sudo delete user, remove home, test user, which is just the username of the person you're trying to delete. Okay, nothing too complicated there either. Adding a user to the sudo group. So if you have another admin that you're trying to add, and you want to add it to an existing group, then you're going to have to end up doing this. So what you're going to need is the ID of that group, which is 27. Okay, sudo usermod -a-g sudo, which is the group. So you can do it by group ID or group name. It's up to you. And then the person or the username that you're trying to add to the sudo group. And then if we look to see if the sudo group add actually worked, we can come down to sudo now. And here we go, ID of 27, Briggs 8658, and Briggs JA. So both of those users now have sudo permissions. Adding a new group add, again, not super hard. And this comes back to one of the original things that we talked about in the beginning of the course, that the difference between a programming language and a scripting language is exactly this. There are a handful of commands that are designed to help you do a set of procedures, but it's not necessarily a object-oriented programming language. It uses the same logic as programming, but in general, it doesn't scale the same way. And we have a lot more of this, where it's just a random command which acts as a function, but not exactly the same. So back on track. So this is how you would add a user. So sudo group add username, not that hard. Okay. Group add result. So if we cat this file again, etc group this time, here's your list of groups. We got a new group down here. Okay. And that's going to do it for this presentation. Again, we did it in the example from a couple of lectures ago. If you're an Alpha Stage student, we'll be going over this quite a bit here very shortly, actually. If you're getting through these topics or you're following along. Yeah, we only have a couple more of these lectures, and then we can actually start getting into a relatively large project where we can start putting a lot of this together. Okay, so with that said, I will see you in the next one.